Hi, I'm Rosh from Energy Matters. Welcome to our podcast, Road to Zero, where we dive headfirst into all things renewable. Join us as we chat with industry experts, tech specialists, and some of your favorite TV and radio personalities, asking the renewable energy questions you want answers to. Our goal, a zero carbon future. This morning, I'm very happy to be joined by my good friend, David Cobb, the Executive General Manager for Auswell Energy. How are you, Cobby?
Good, mate. Yourself? Thanks for having me on. Well. Much appreciated.
You're very welcome, mate. It's always a pleasure to have you on here. I'm not sure actually, it's maybe your first podcast with me. Is that right? Or is it the second?
It is, yeah. We a couple of years ago, we were doing some things down Eleanor way. I remember that. That was the home show. So, yeah, mate, it's great to see you popping up all over my socials and now the TV as well. So, great work on what you do.
It has been a lot. A lot happens in this industry. They call it the solar coaster for a very good reason, because it really, in the time that we've both been involved in renewable energy, we've seen over the last, over a decade, we've seen so many changes, ups and downs. Look, positive because we're progressing and we're finally getting to where we need to get to. But at the same token, so many challenges. So we'll discuss some of those today because it's an interesting conversation. Given the fact that the general manager of Auswell Energy, for anyone that doesn't know, Auswell Energy, part of the Edison Group, specialise in residential solar power systems as well as commercial, any size and scale of commercial solar. So it's a good one just to delve in a bit deeper and find out a little bit more about what it's like from an installer/retailer's perspective, being in this industry, as well as the different types of components and the different types of technology that's available to help us all reduce our carbon footprint. The other primary reason for having Cobby on today is this week's episode of Energy Matters, which is on Saturday, 4 p.m. on 9 Life, as well as 8 a.m. on Sunday, will be featuring my own home, which was installed by Auswell Energy. So it's the first time I've actually managed to live in a place that could go solar, having been in an apartment for 25 years prior to this. So I'm delighted to finally have a positive carbon footprint, which is amazing. And it's really down to the team at Auswell that helped me facilitate that. So we'll talk about that in a little while as well. Lots to chat about, Cobby. Before we go into all that sort of stuff, I know my audience likes to know a little bit more about the person behind the brand. So can you tell them a bit more about yourself, your career to date, and what they use at Auswell?
Yeah. Well, I've always been in the sales and marketing world and arena, so that's how we got to know each other. 22 years since I arrived in Australia and started that journey. For me, first of all, before we can get into Auswell, the solar industry was an attraction. I was sales and marketing, yes, but it was always around that energy industry, retail energy, and I just loved helping customers reduce their outgoings, whether that was residential or commercial, and when they could switch their electricity bill, save some money, and play that game, then that worked well. So energy brokerage, retail side, and then moving into renewables when it really started to move and groove and kick off. I was quite cautious looking at solar and getting involved, and still today, unfortunately, you've got to really do a lot of research to make sure you do get the installer is who they say they are and have been around for as long as they have. So in my earlier part of solar, my marketing company I was working for at the time did get burnt a few times by solar installers or marketing companies and that sort of thing. So that's still unfortunately a bit in the space at the moment. But when it came down to it, it just looked like an absolute no-brainer that you could put renewable energy on the roof that's helping the environment, but also reduce your outgoings and essentially get a 3 to 5 year payback on your investment. You're spending that money anyway, either dead money to retailers or to put your own asset on your roof, helping the environment and all the positive things that came with that. So, coming from that kind of reviewing customers' energy bills all the time and helping them switch and save, to the switch to renewables and save and help the planet, kind of just fed into what I was already enjoying and loving.
Which actually makes complete sense. I mean, fundamentally, and this is probably, there's a couple of components to this. I mean, one of the key frustrations of anyone working in this industry, speaking to the consumer, is that, solar power is now very much a tried and tested product. It's like building your own power station for your home. And but fundamentally, yes, I like the great thing about you and I and the decades we've known each other is we fundamentally both like to make a difference. We've worked on loads of different charity projects together, and done some incredible stuff outside of work. But inside of work, there's a tangible way a person can reduce their carbon footprint, and by doing so, reduce their energy bills, and it kind of goes hand in hand. So, which is what makes solar power for us just such an attractive proposition for anybody, be it a homeowner or a business owner or anyone living in a working in a building. You can actually just reduce your carbon footprint and reduce your energy bills. And now, probably for the first time over the last couple of years, the return on investment, including battery storage, is the best it's ever been. Cobby, you did touch on it a second ago, and at the beginning of the chat, that I suppose one of the frustrations that you see inside of the organization that you're working with is that Auswell do have a very, just not only a robust way of going about doing what they do, which includes a lot of communication with the consumer during the process, but it really is that there still are, organizations in our industry that don't do the right thing by customers. I mean, we won't delve too much in the negative side of things, but really on the positive side, I mean, what differentiates Auswell from its competitors, would you say?
Yeah, well, the first checks I was doing, I suppose I'd say the customers were quite transparent in the checks that you should do on us and others that you're comparing our quotes with. Things like a quick ABN search and checking that the actual registered business name, not a sub name or something like that, but registered business name, when it was registered, how long they've been around. Because we're seeing in like lifetime warranties on workmanship now, and you start looking at the ABN, a quick ABN check, they've only been around for a couple of years, and might be, so again, don't go another negative, but they've got a proper bricks and mortar business with a head office and with a warehouse. Why is that important versus going to a local, Sparky installer? For me, it's that protection around the warranties. We have internal installers as well as subcontractors, and even our subcontractors, we then countersign the warranties. So, the more localized you go, everyone wants to help out the local business. We do that as well. But then making sure they can actually be there for the length of your warranties, I thought was super important. Why did I join Auswell? For me, I was doing this research myself. I got introduced by Phil, who's the group founder and CEO. So I did all those checks, and like many, he told me how great they were and the quality of their product and the cost and the value proposition, which all sounded great. But then it wasn't until I came into the office to see that all the internal engineers that he had told me about, internal electricians, as well as our actual own internal warehouse and just an actual proper head office. Unfortunately, a lot of solar companies are just solar sales companies, satellite offices and that sort of thing. And a lot of installers out there, it's not that hard to start a solar installation business. I feel, and we feel, there should be a few more hoops to jump through before you can just register a solar business. So doing like the ABN checks, checking their address, and even doing a Google Street View or even drive-by. Like we had a couple of customers come into our office yesterday where I'm sat here in the boardroom. And then doing those checks of do they have the internal people. I don't believe there's a lot of concern around subcontracting in the install. But as long as there's quality measures in place, as in jobs are inspected throughout the process and at the end, you can actually get better quality installation from a subcontractor of a solar retailer than the internal guys that are on hourly rates and like to take their time and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, hopefully I've answered your question there, Rosh. I kind of in two, I'll try to answer it in why am I here at Auswell, as well as what should a customer checks they should do on us, as well as others that they're considering.
Yeah, which is absolutely fantastic, and look, you've answered it incredibly well. I mean, I think for us at Energy Matters, we, as everyone watching or listening knows, not only do we work on TV shows and we promote the industry and we look at the latest and greatest technology and then really just write up content on that to educate people in layman's terms so they can get better educated and make their own choices. But we supply anyone that makes an inquiry through Energy Matters. We then supply that inquiry or hand that inquiry on to local installers. And what we often find, and people often come to us saying, well, hang on a second, we wanted local installers. This is an organization that's based in a CBD. They're not local. But I think one of the key points you just touched on as well is, there are local installers all around the country. And invariably, those guys may be smaller, may just be one or two in a crew or three or four in a crew, but they need, they don't have the capacity to do marketing. And they don't, they're trained professionals. They're electricians or plumbers by trade, and marketing isn't their wheelhouse. And when I say marketing, it's not about spin and different types of ads and creativity to win work. It's just fundamentally being able to sit in front of your computer and post ads and do those things that generally are very, very expensive and time consuming. And secondly, takes them away from their wheelhouse, which is installing solar power. So really, they need organizations like you that are larger retailers that have processes, compliance, checks and balances, administration, operations, financial support, and resources to help them grow their own business. So really, for anyone watching who hasn't gone solar yet or has gone solar and wants to upgrade their system, when you come to an organization like us or anyone else, or even directly to Auswell to request, a quote for solar power, although you're dealing with an organization that maybe have a centralized head office somewhere in the Gold Coast or Brisbane or Melbourne or wherever, if they say they can install you, fundamentally, they're not going to be sending their guys hundreds of kilometers to your property. They're going to be using your local guys that ordinarily would not have access to that inquiry, and then making sure that they follow a process to enable you to get installed. And as Cobby just said, they're under the warranty of Auswell. They're under the warranty of the larger organizations. If anything does go wrong and those guys retire or decide not to be involved in the industry anymore or move overseas or do whatever, you still have Auswell to find another local person to assist you. So it really is that peace of mind, Cobby, is what I'm sort of hearing and sensing as to why someone would want to work with an organization like you, but also to know that you've actually done your due diligence at the beginning and making sure that customer is well supported.
Yeah, 100%. And further to that, you now we're sticking into their wheelhouse. So what brought me here is Phil, our founder, is an engineer, managing director of Auswell, is an electrician and installer. We've got more installers, engineers, and tech support than we do salespeople per se. But the piece they didn't have is how to have that conversation with the customer and put things, like you said, in simple terms for the customer. Phil's fantastic, Robbie are fantastic, but the technical overload where the customer just feels too confusing to be with Auswell, that's the wall they'll come against. So it's kind of like bringing my background of teaching people to speak to customers daily and understand their power bill. We feel it's a big part of ours, and I think a customer can tell the difference when they're speaking to a good quality company, when they can explain to the customer how to understand their power bill, how do they come to the size system that they decide to come to. And if the sales rep or installer that the customer's speaking to can answer those basic questions, they're essentially just whacking panels up on a roof and saying that your bill will be next to nothing and see you later. And then we had COVID hit, so because we got residential, commercial, and electrical contracting, even in our little world, we see our sparkies and installers wanting to move from one to the other from where the cash was. So, going with that local installer, certainly support them, but just go into eyes wide open. That if the money dries up in solar and picks up in the mines, or you see them move all the time. So it's just a consideration, no right or wrong. But yeah, we support local installers around the country. As well as having all the system design and education done by engineers to our customer service account managers and salespeople, rather than a salesperson teaching a salesperson, and just to try and convince a customer solar's a good thing, and it can often sound too good to be true.
No, for sure. And I think you've also, indirectly answered the question as well, which a lot of people watching may have, which is why, do solar systems sometimes cost more with one organization than another? And unfortunately, the Australian solar industry, since I've been in it, since 2008, has always been what we call a race to the bottom, which is really, you've got, and once again, not being disrespectful to anyone, because we have a lot of retailers and stores around the country that we work with that offer solar power really, really, really super low prices, and a lot of others who don't. But the fundamental difference is those who essentially are offering the price or offering a solar system at a slightly higher price point have also factored in everything that's intangible that could go wrong with that solar system over the next 10 to 25 years. And if they have a business model like yours that's been designed to support that customer forever, essentially, or certainly within product warranty periods, but probably for longer if they actually reached out to you, you have to factor that in at the very beginning. Because otherwise, how are you going to pay for electricians and sparkies and operations teams and monitoring to actually identify and help that customer? It will send that business broke. So I think that's really one of the things that I've really got to understand about your organisation and many others like you, that deliver that next level of service and organizational support, is that you kind of have to factor those things in, and they cost money. So so you won't always, if anyone watching or listening, I mean, when you're getting a quote for solar power, you really want to consider that this is a lifetime investment, right? So, panels are designed now to last for over 25 years. In some cases, have 40-year product warranties, which is your lifetime essentially. And even batteries may only have a 10-year product warranty, but essentially will last for about 14, 15 years, if not more. So, it really is about getting it right at the beginning and not being too, yes, you want it to be a competitive price, but the same token, it's about trusting the organization you're working with. And that's the real sense I get from yourselves, Cobster. Mate, before we, I want to talk about my solar system, because I'm very proud. I'm very proud of finally go solar. I went all in, as expected I would.
You sure did.
So there's a bit of story about it. So really, I've lived in an apartment with my wife and my young child, who's now 14, for the last 25 years. We've lived all over the country, started in Sydney, moved to Melbourne, moved back to Sydney, lived in Sydney for 6.5 years in an apartment, moved to the Gold Coast, lived in various different places around the Gold Coast for 9 years, moved to Melbourne, lived in an apartment in Port Melbourne for 9 years. And then we bought our dream home probably about 18 months ago, probably about almost 2 years ago now. And then rented it out for a year before we were ready to move. And then we relocated as a family back to the Gold Coast about 9 months ago. So that presented for me for the first time the opportunity to have a solar power system installed. I obviously want to be essentially off grid without being off grid, and I wanted to be carbon positive. So our property has over 200 trees. It's a small acreage. It's beautiful. I managed to get a very, I was lucky in terms of how much we paid for it. So it was my house is obviously a 4-bedroom home in the hinterland in the Gold Coast. Yeah, I paid pretty much half of what I would have paid if I bought an apartment in Melbourne. So, it was a great investment from that perspective, but also gave me the freedom, the land, lots of trees, beautiful, and a nice big roof. So I remember, Cobby, when I came and spoke to you, I was like, look, obviously I know a lot about solar power, but I wanted to go through the whole journey as anyone would do as a consumer. So before we talk about that, let's just quickly play a short promo video of this week's episode of Energy Matters. It's the very final episode of the season. This is the final segment of the season 2. This is my home installed with technology installed by Auswell. Check it out. Being carbon positive is a challenge. The first step is electrification, which means having your home be completely powered by electricity. The next stage was solar power, and we chose to install 20 kilowatts of solar, plus also 38.5 kilowatt hours of battery storage. Being carbon positive is an amazing feeling. At the same token, there is still so much more to do. We're delighted with what we've done so far to this property, taken lots of little tips, lots of bits of advice, and we've created a carbon positive environment. All right, there you go, Cobby. So that was absolutely awesome. It was a beautiful sunny day, thank God, in between lots and lots and lots of rain that we've had over the last few months.
Yes.
Mate, first of all, I know, unfortunately, you weren't available on the day, and you've had Tommy, who's awesome, there interviewing me or being interviewed by me and obviously chatting about the home. Did he enjoy filming Energy Matters?
Yeah, he sure did. Hopefully it comes through camera, but Tommy's very passionate about helping people. And he's a bit of a character as well. So, we thought he did a great job, and he had an absolute blast. So thanks for having him on. And I think he's probably better in front of the camera than I was. So I think you got a bit of an upgrade on that front, mate. No,
I don't know, mate. I remember you doing a Longy solo one 3 or 4 years ago at Open Homes, and you did pretty well on that. So that's all good.
Yeah,
so, Cobby, so the process for me really was, we went through the whole process like any consumer would do. Which really fundamentally started off, just showing you my power bill. Can you kind of talk me through the process that we went through and how we got to my solar system?
Yeah, sure. Look, you do have a beautiful roof. I've had a bit of a laugh with you off camera and through the process, but it was a great roof for the guys to be up there installing solar. And And yeah, it starts off for us always looking at the customer's power bill, and actually looking at the actual usage, working out with the customer the percentage of that use on the bill that is daytime versus nighttime, and that sort of thing. You were clear from the get-go. You wanted to have that, net zero, road to net zero. So with batteries, so making sure that we size that, and not just for yourself, where we could fill. What's happened is we've ended up filling that roof to a degree, one side of it, and large battery. But I suppose I just want everyone to know it wasn't because we've just gone and done that because you wanted to just, I just want my roof maxed. Actually came back to the numbers. Again, we do see competitors that might quote a larger battery than what we quote, or sometimes a smaller battery than what we quote. And we're big on making sure the customer understands, as I treat you all my guys, the numbers behind the numbers, because then it makes sense, right? And if you've got a system that you're looking to put on, solar only or solar with battery, where you really can't make sense as to why you're being told to install that size, then certainly question it. So yeah, you have plenty of questions as always. We went back and forth and landed on 20 kilowatts solar, which is 44 of the AIKO 455 watt panels, 10 kilowatt inverter, into 38 kilowatt hours of battery storage with GoodWe. So yeah, you can crank those aircons 24/7 now, mate.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I mean, like obviously, as people would know who've been watching the TV show, and if you haven't, definitely jump onto our website, energymatters.com.au, to kind of read all about the different brands we're featured on it. But I was lucky enough during the TV show to go and film in China. And look, I know a lot of people have got an opinion about technology in China, and there's also a lot of media that's more like, negative media. Obviously that always will be. But for me, I just really wanted to get to China and actually see what it was like over there, and actually visit brands that I knew really well and that I had a real, actually like the way their ethos, the way they are as organizations, and see it up front and personal. So I got to go to AIKO's factory in Zhuhai, just outside of Hong Kong, and watch the panels being manufactured. And we featured that on on episode 1 of the Energy Matters TV show. And then on that same trip, we then visited GoodWe in Suzhou, just outside of Shanghai. And I got to see inverters and batteries being manufactured. So for me, don't get me wrong, I know anyone watching or listening, you're not going to get probably the same opportunity to go and visit the factories where the technology is made. But I chose that tech above all other technology. Although I love a lot of brands, and there's a lot of amazing technology brands out there that I'm a massive fan of, I got to see my AIKO solar panels being made, and I got to see not probably my exact panels, but I got to see the panel being manufactured. And, for me, it was just peace of mind knowing this is how it's put together. This is the process. This is the quality control. This is the R&D behind it and the thought process. And it was an absolute no-brainer for me. So when I came back and you were asking me, do you have any preferences on technology? I was like, look, I'd love to have the all-black AIKO panels. I'd love to have the GoodWe, the latest inverter, which is a hybrid inverter, plus their battery set, which is stackable and modular. So I could just work out how many batteries I needed, and you really helped me with the math on that one. So it was an absolute no-brainer. I guess, if we just quickly talk about the brands that I've chosen, I mean, what do you love as Auswell around AIKO Energy for their solar panels and GoodWe in terms of inverters and batteries?
Yeah, starting with GoodWe. I mean, GoodWe started now since 2012. Started out as one of the lower end inverters, obviously entering the market, and is now really got set themselves established as a good quality, long-standing premium inverter. And just again, for us, it's important. We're hitting our 10th year, so to work with manufacturers and brands that have been around that long and have got that bankability behind them. Because yes, we do sign the warranties, but we don't want things failing, because that's just inconvenient for the customer. Power's down, savings are down, and then we've got more expense to us to go back out and fix. So, GoodWe, when you came back and said GoodWe, that was music to our ears. And 38 kilowatts of battery stackable is, just fantastic. And the space as well. So the area that you had for the batteries to be installed, I'm sure it's going to be on a episode, if not already. It just fitted well there. So we kind of had all the ticks from that regard. And then AIKO, I mean, they've been manufacturing cells for, you probably know the exact year better than myself, but for them to come out to Europe and then Australia and be hitting all the awards that they're hitting is great. But again, before we start any newer product, we've got 3-4 engineers set upstairs. So whenever a product comes my way from a wholesaler or a manufacturer trying to get a meeting with us, it goes through that due diligence. And when those guys came back as excited as the guys directly from AIKO, then we're in, and we've got a fantastic relationship with AIKO and GoodWe. So I genuinely can't think of a warranty claim we've had with either off the top of my head, but I just know that when something, if something's not configuring online when our guys are doing the install, just the speed to answer from manufacturer support is important for us. Otherwise, installers get frustrated, they sit around waiting, and customers get frustrated if the system's installed and they can't see it on their monitoring portal. So yeah, just that installer support with both is fantastic as well.
Which is amazing. And once again, I mean, the tech I'm using, especially with the the GoodWe inverter, which is the EHB, I think it's called. It's the latest hybrid inverter. I mean, I think that inverter was the first one installed in the country.
It was, yeah.
So even your team were like, okay, we've not come across that before. But then, once again, the instructions provided by GoodWe and the level of technical support from their team, real-time support to help your guys if they had any questions, was incredible. Yes, as it turned out, I know my cabling was an absolute palaver for them because, my wife did not want anything to be visible. I mean, our panels are beautiful. They're all black, so they look lovely on the roof, but she didn't want the inverters and the batteries anywhere near, so they installed them nicely in the back of the home, which is outside of sunlight, but still cops a bit of sunlight and a bit of weather. Everything's obviously weather resistant. And it looked amazing. But your team really obviously spent a lot of time having to do the cabling and the wiring to make sure it was perfect, and did an incredible job, I have to say. One thing I will say for anyone listening and watching who wants to know why we went for such a large solar system, I think for me it was we wanted to be carbon positive as opposed to just being like net zero carbon neutral. But we also wanted to plan ahead. So this home for us is our forever home. My wife and I have no intention now of moving anywhere else for the next 25 years. And my daughter's 14 and she'll be growing up and may stay here, may not. But we also want to be completely sustainable. So we're going to be building, aquaponics, so we can start to harvest our own fish and vegetables and fruits and stuff like that. And our energy requirement is going to be huge. So the other side of it was, so we're planning well ahead of what we needed now. But the other part is we've lived here for about 7 months before we went solar. And we did that intentionally. The first 3 months, we had no air conditioning. We were consuming probably about 14 to 15 kilowatt hours of electricity every day. Then we installed air conditioning, and our bill, our daily usage went up from 14 to about 26 kilowatt hours every single day. And unfortunately, Queensland's not going to get any cooler. It's going to get a lot hotter, as is the entire planet. So we're like, right, so we need to be generating at least 30 to 40 kilowatt hours. Now, don't get me wrong, we're doing probably about 70 to 80 a day, although our face is western with a little bit of north. So we're really only getting maximum production, from about sort of 2 in the afternoon. We're still producing at around 80%, about 20 kilowatts, and we're doing incredibly well. So we've got lots of extra surplus electricity. But really, the one of the key drivers for me was in those 7 months that we lived here, we had 5 power cuts or 5 blackouts, not including the cyclone. And out of those 5 blackouts, 4 were random ones that shouldn't have happened, that happened for various reasons. And 1 was a planned one because there was 4 unplanned ones. So they wanted to see what was wrong. And then we had the cyclone. And the cyclone happened before I got installed. I'd already worked it out with you. And you got the panels on the roof, and we knew some bad weather was coming. So it's like, let's hold for now. We'll completely install after the weather passes through. And I had a 9-day blackout. So we had no energy for 9 days. And it was the most frustrating 9 days of our lives. Yes, the cyclone was terrifying at times, but it was more so the fact that we had no power for 9 days. And I was lifting off 1 canister of Weber gas, which, to get us through that period. So that didn't really last. But then, so that, that was annoying. And it really reinforced for me that, we need to be energy independent, right? Not for, yes, we want to save money, and our power bills, for those 2 quarters without solar were ridiculous. But at the same token, the energy independence and that just to be able to maintain your lifestyle and power your fridge, power your lights, not walk around with candlelight and not have all your food go off in your fridge. I mean, it's just basic things like that really were the core driver for battery storage. So that really influenced everything significantly for me. Since we've had the solar installed, Cobby, I don't know if I've told you this, but we've had, and we have a Facebook group in the local area which covers our whole suburb and surrounding streets. And we've had 4 minor blackouts since I've had them installed. And on every single occasion, the only reason we knew how is in that split second when there's a blackout and the battery basically takes over the home. You don't notice it because the lights don't go out and nothing really happens. But if you're watching Netflix, the episode turns off quickly and then it goes to the home screen. And I'm like, that happened. And that's why, right? Because there's a disruption in power. It's the only way we've known it, that we've had a blackout. And then we see the street lights are out, and our friends and neighbors, their lights are out. We're like, it's one of those. So already we've had benefits from it. Now, they've been short blackouts, but, potentially they could get worse. So that's kind of explains why we've done what we've done, really, from our perspective in terms of such a large system. And we've also just covered the fact that we don't know what's going to happen in the future with weather. It doesn't look great. Obviously, global warming is here to stay, and climate change is a direct result of global warming. It's going to become more erratic. So, we've basically planned for worst case scenarios in the future, but more importantly, just energy independence and not having to be a victim of of stuff that's completely outside of our control, like the grid. Cobby, do you find inside of the conversations that you're having, a lot of other people are having similar discussions with you, and that's a concern for them too?
Yeah, 100%. It's becoming more and more of the discussion. And just going back to comparing quotes, like tying this into it, I'm just thinking of the viewer that's listening to this, just checking, again, apples for apples. We often see it solar and battery, and then we've got solar and battery and backup. And then they're questioning why our quote isn't quite as sharp as the local person's quote. So again, for listeners, just checking that when you go in battery, if you are wanting backup and something that like Roshan's talking about here, then you need backup. Otherwise, you've got solar and you've got the battery there for nighttime, but in the event of an outage, blackout, you've got no backup. And then if you're in an area which can be prone to blackouts for multiple days, making sure that the battery technology and the backup and the whole technology you got there is suitable for that type of environment. Because you can get a battery with backup, but then if the grid's still down the next day, you get frustrated customers that are going, solar and battery. And we get customers even calling us because they went with somebody else, but then that company's not answering, but they're remembered, like Tommy, or you see on the show or whatever. So they'll call and say, hey, look, I know I went with somebody else, but this isn't working. And it turns out they weren't sort of the solution that they thought they had. So checking that. But yeah, it's a growing conversation. Obviously, I won't make this political, but we're waiting on what happens and all the battery rebates and everything coming out and what's going to happen in each state there. So watch this space. But that energy independence versus just let's go solar to save some money off our power bills is more the weightier.
Absolutely. And look, inside of that as well, I mean, once again, we made a significant investment towards renewable energy technology because, as I said, it's a 25-year investment for us because we are going to be here for 25 years. But really, the return on investment on a solar system is sub 3 years. Even now with battery storage, the prices have come down so much. And that's one of the other things I love about GoodWe. It's amazing technology, but at the same token, it's very, very reasonable in terms of how much it costs. So you can see return investments with batteries included at sub 7 years, So it really has got to that point now where it makes complete sense to add battery storage. We're not going to talk about external rebates that are available via sort of state or federal governments because they're obviously there to subsidize it. But fundamentally, the conversation you should be having if you're chatting to the team at Auswell Energy is really, here's my bill. This is the house I live in. This is how long I intend to live here for. And, this is how old my kids are now, and so can you just sort of talk me through what my solution should look like, not just for today, but also for the future. And really, people have to start to get that sort of mindset. Whereas, everything we're doing now is planning a few steps ahead. And especially if you intend to be in that house for a long period of time, you want to be planning for the kids getting older, using more technology, for the climate just generally getting a lot hotter. It doesn't matter where you live in Australia. Our summers are going to get a lot hotter. Our winters are going to get a lot milder. So, that's happening, right? So it's happening all around the world. So, you're going to probably lean on air conditioning a lot more in the future than you do now, even if you have got really great open spaces with a lovely breeze coming through. Cobby, one thing you mentioned a little while ago, and I'm just going to reframe it slightly just for anyone who didn't quite get it. As Cobby said a minute ago, with battery storage and backup, there is a massive difference between having a solar system and batteries, and having a solar system and batteries and a battery backup. And the backup protection is what it essentially means is if there is a blackout, if you didn't have it, your solar system would not work. Okay, because the grid would automatically tell your inverter to switch off, and you have protection on there to make sure there's no surges and it's not a risk, and your system would automatically deactivate, which means you're not producing solar power during the blackout. But when you have blackout protection, the same thing happens, but then your inverter knows that, okay, we've had a power cut, the grid wants me to disconnect from it, which I'm happy to do, but I also know I have batteries which I can work with, and I can also use the batteries to help power the solar system, because the solar system needs voltage to actually work. So it'll send enough power to the solar system via the inverter. Will take it from the batteries, power the solar system itself to get everything working. So even when you're in a blackout situation where the grid's now down and no one's got access to electricity, your solar system in its entirety is still working, and it's still producing electricity, still being converted by the inverter, still being stored. Your batteries are still being stored during the daytime, and you're powering your home at the same time. And then when it gets to nighttime, then it's just pulling off the battery storage. So for us, we maxed on battery storage as well, purely because we wanted to make sure that we've had so much crap weather over the last 3 months, like rain torrentially for weeks and weeks and weeks, plus a cyclone to throw into the mix. So we banked on the fact that maybe our solar system would only produce for maybe 20% or 25% on any given day because of dark, stormy clouds. So we wanted to have enough battery storage in play just so we had 2 or 3 days worth of battery, as well as maybe producing at 20 to 25% during the daytime on really crap weather days. So that's the sort of logic you kind of have to go through. And these are the conversations you need to have with the likes of Cobby and his team at Auswell, just to really, better explain what your concerns are and what the end solution would be, which you've done a really good job at doing, Cobby. We've also been on the call for quite a while now, and I know I've done a lot of yapping. There's a couple more key points I know the people listening and watching are going to want to know. So really, we understand your process, really, getting a power bill, evaluating the power bill, and then just really coming up with a system for the customer. I mean, for anyone that doesn't really have much cash in the bank, I mean, what other options are there available to customers to be able to afford to go solar and to add batteries now rather than to wait?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, another question we ask is your budget, any equipment particularly you're after. Majority of people we find say, no, I'm trusting you to come back to me, and this is I want to go for a budget system or a best value for money, or I want the bells and whistles, and money's not an object type thing. So yeah, there's something there. There is something there for everybody. I suppose the key message with solar: if you're paying a power bill and you're finding the money to pay for that power bill, then you can really afford to go solar. Because there's payment plans and all sorts that can be in place that can mirror your current spend. So yeah, we have customers that are after the return investment will pay for the solar direct deposit and payment plans, payment process throughout the installation, that sort of thing. And then we have others that say, okay, well, I don't want to use my own money for solar. I've heard about these payment plans. How do they work? And then we show them, and that's where it is even more important to understand how much you're going to save from your current power bill by going solar, to then know what you got for that as a spending shift for a payment plan. But yeah, there's a solar only string inverter, 6.6 kilowatt system. That's certainly going to impact your power bill and have you on that first road to renewables. I'd highly recommend getting a quote for a hybrid inverter equivalent. So then you've got a hybrid inverter on your wall, which you can then install DC coupled batteries to that down the track as like a stage 2. But even if you just really have a low power bill, you want to go solar, you want a string standard system, 6.6 kilowatt with a 5 kilowatt string inverter, that inverter in 10 years time when it's up for warranty can always be replaced for a hybrid inverter at that point. And there are also AC coupled batteries that can plug straight in to any inverter. So yeah, it's really,
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. And for once again, anyone watching, I mean, the great thing about battery storage, especially the stuff that I installed, which is GoodWe's Lynx battery storage, It's modular, so they come in 3.2 modules. So really, the sensible person would just have 2 modules, which is like 6.4 kilowatt hours of battery storage, and that coupled with what Cobby just described, being like a 6.6 kilowatts of panels and the 5 kilowatt inverter. You pretty much are going to be producing around 20 kilowatt hours or 20 kilowatts of electricity every single day, which is pretty much more than the average home needs, and will actually do the job. The great thing is, everything's expandable, and you can obviously add more modules of battery storage if you find you're needing to. If you're exporting electricity back into the grid and getting paid 4 cents for it, you're better off just adding another module and storing that power. And then it gives you access to EVs and stuff like that in the future as well. Awesome, Cobby. Final thing I've got to ask you is, why do you think, obviously, in line with the Energy Matters TV show, we know what we're making the show. We know the whole purpose is to educate people on the technology and to give them peace of mind. But why is it important for people to better understand energy and how they can make a difference both to their bills and to the climate, in your opinion?
Well, again, it comes all the way back even to grid stability. The grid was never designed for renewables. So, like in your situation, you're saying there, you've had that 4 or 5 blackouts since you've had the system on. That's just going to become more and more frequent. And you're not completely rural, So some people might be listening, going, I'm in a metropolitan area, or I'm in a large suburb. We only had a blackout when there was a major cyclone. However, there's, semi-rural that have brownouts and blackouts quite frequently, and that's going to start happening in more metropolitan areas because, unless we make this shift with batteries. So, batteries really are this uptake of batteries really are important to the grid. And then, if you've been paying, like I say, own your home on a mortgage, paying power to the energy companies month in, month out, quarter out, year in, year out, that slight spending shift, and you have your own asset on your roof, you start on the road to your own independence. And the returns now are better than they've ever been. Obviously, there's a lot going on worldwide at the moment. But at the minute, the value for money, the returns on solar only or solar and batteries are better than they've ever been. So, yes, we find, energy savings, but that kind of like taking control. People are getting a little bit sick of not having that control, and they want that energy independence and control, and obviously helping the environment. All comes into it as well.
No, completely. And really just, future pacing, guys. I mean, look, the goal for us, obviously, with Energy Matters TV show is to show you ways of reducing your carbon footprint, but by doing so, reduce your energy bills. So those two things go hand in hand. No matter what actions you take to reduce your carbon footprint, be it getting a bus as opposed to driving, be it, recycling, reusing bottles, just filling it with tap water or filtered water rather than buying fresh bottles of water, all those different actions help reduce your carbon footprint and save you money. So they do go hand in hand, no matter what they are. Even if you can't go solar like I can for 25 years, there are different ways you can reduce your carbon footprint and save money across all different aspects of your life. And then really, we talk about blackouts. I mean, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'll finish it with this point, the whole of Spain, Portugal, and part of France had a blackout. Like 2 and a bit countries had a complete blackout. Now, and some of them, it took not weeks, but it took a long time to reconnect some people, especially the ones in regional areas. Now, that's whole countries going out, and that's about grid stabilization. So it's not just here in Australia, it's everywhere around the world. And if whole countries can have a blackout, it kind of says to you what's going to happen, what potentially could go wrong in the future. So really grid independence and just being able to support yourself and your family through those types of events, especially if we have more crazy weather events over that period of time, is essential. Like, this isn't scaremongering. It's a case of you just want to be able to turn the lights on and have cold food in your fridge freezer and be able to cook a meal. They're the basics, right? So, solar power, definitely amazing. It has to be done. But adding a small battery now is definitely the time to start really having those conversations and working out what the ideal solution is for you. Cobby, thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Anything else you want to add before we finish up?
No, that's great. Great conversation as always, Rosh. And good luck to everybody out there. Again, it's not just about us, but if you want Auswell, have a look, but then just do those checks on whatever installer that you're looking for.
And Cobby, what areas does Auswell cover?
National. So we're very prominent on the Eastern Seaboard, Victoria, South Australia. We've got commercial projects happening at the moment in WA. Northern Territory, sorry guys, if you're up there, we're not there at the moment. But yeah, essentially national other than Northern Territory is the short answer.
Nice one. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you once again. Great to see you, and I look forward to having a chat to you very, very soon.
Chat soon. Cheers, Rosh.
Cheers, mate. See you. So, guys, you heard it here first. Look, it really is now's the time to go solar. Not more so. Obviously, price points are great. Things are getting, more cost effective. Batteries have definitely come down in price. Panels, to be fair, are pretty much at the point. I don't think they can go anywhere else now because they're as lean as they can possibly go without panel manufacturers going bankrupt. So really, it's the best time to actually get quotes to go solar. You can jump on our website, ngmatters.com.au/free solar quotes to get a quote for solar power. We work with Auswell on many different states and supply those inquiries when they come through. So feel free to go direct to Auswell or via our website, and we'll make sure they quote you on the same technology. If you want the same technology as I've got at my house, check out the page on the Energy Matters website so you can see what I've got, how it's actually tracking live as we're producing power. So you can kind of see what it's doing for me and for my family, and then by all means we can get you a quote on a similar type of setup to what I've got. And I'll certainly be referring those particular opportunities, as long as they're within the coverage area of Auswell, to the Auswell guys to basically contact you and quote you accordingly. You can see everything we've just discussed today live on this week's episode on Saturday at 4 p.m. on 9 Life on the 9 network. And if you missed out on Saturday, you're out with the kids, feel free to tune in 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, as well as a couple other times throughout the week. If you missed those, all the different products that we've talked about and those different TV segments are available on our website for you to review anytime you like. Aside from that, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it. I hope you enjoy this week's episode of Energy Matters. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and feel free to reach out via web chat if you have any questions. All the best, guys. Take care.